with that, I wanted to first start by introducing our panelists for today's chat. And so we have three panelists that are all members of the FOP community, and they're going to kind of introduce themselves in their talk. And so I'm just going to kind of run briefly through them and let you guys know the flow of today's meeting. So over here on the right, Luciana is going to be our first panelist. She's going to be speaking about her experience advocating for especially some mental health needs. And then Oliver over here on the left is going to speak. He is talking really about the transition of advocating, speaking up for his needs in a variety of different settings. And then Miriam is going to finish us out. She's here in the middle, and she is speaking about sharing her experience in a medical setting, kind of advocating with some of her medical team and the support group, the really wonderful support group that she has built. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and I will let Luciana get us started. So go ahead, Luciana.
Hi everyone, lovely to meet you all, for those I've not met before. I'm Luciana, I'm from the UK, from just outside of Manchester, for those of you who may be aware of Manchester. I'm 22, nearly 23 in May, and I'm going to be advocating regarding, as Hope mentioned, regarding some areas of mental health and sort of like the stress and impacts of stress on FOP. And as I've had quite a few experiences in relation to that in recent months, obviously COVID's played a bit of a part of that, but also obviously with regards to employment experiences and things like that. So just to obviously get started, just a bit of a start on it. My obviously advocation is really about the mental health side of things, and obviously flare-ups can be brought on by a number of different factors, obviously stress, trauma, and obviously sometimes just out of the blue really. But I've noticed throughout my obviously lifetime of having FOP, a lot of it does come down to sort of stress and also like understanding how that can impact that. So I actually started working 3.5 years ago for a local employer, doing recruitment and business development, which was an apprenticeship at the start. From the very start of working, I was always sort of worried about expressing having a disability to an employer, from sort of the interview process to actually commencing work and going in for the interview and obviously discussing having a disability. And obviously for many of us with FOP, it's a physical disability, so obviously you can see that we have got a disability. And from the start of my interview, I was very open and honest regarding expressing my needs and support and things, and obviously how different things can trigger having a flare-up. So it wasn't just the physical aspect of being in an office with 40 other members of staff, it was also the stress side of it and the pressures of work. So I was very open from the start, which was a big thing for me, obviously, because I'd never had a job before, a proper job. So it was quite a comforted thing for me to do, but it really did help along the way. So obviously it's just how work demands and pressures can obviously impact your FOP, and also balancing sort of life changes in terms of like COVID and different pressures from work and job demands with regards to obviously other life events. So obviously over here in the UK, COVID was a big breakout in sort of March last year, and my employer, obviously having known my things that trigger my flare-ups and things, the director invited me and my mum into the office for just a casual chat really, just to sort of explain and come to terms with what we need to do, what's best for me regarding COVID. And that was really great to know that they were always brilliant from the start. And also obviously they allowed me to work from home that bit earlier than everyone else. And they knew that obviously if there was too much stress on the role, then that could be reduced. Obviously working from home, sometimes you do actually end up working a bit more. So they understood that might need to change and things. And then unfortunately in August last year, due to a number of factors really, COVID, additional too much stress from work, again, mental health struggles, I had to resign from my job, which was a tough decision, and I'm still sort of dealing with that now. But I think looking back on it, it was definitely the right decision to make, and obviously it was weighing those costs and benefits of having a disability and being able to work. And don't get me wrong, I loved my job and everyone treated me with great respect, and they were always brilliant in regards to understanding that if I was doing too much, it could result in a flare up. And having that extra time of work, if I had a flare up, or I had regular meetings to sort of look at my time management and tasks and things. And they were very supportive of that. And I think it's about being that open from the very start, as opposed to sort of getting a job and then suddenly saying, well, this is what I need because this is what happens. And I think you've just got to sort of have those difficult conversations, but treat them with respect and honesty, and lay those foundations quite early on, as opposed to sort of leaving it until you're a few sort of months down the line, weeks down the line. So obviously it was a tough decision, but obviously I had to make the right decision for my health and my well-being, and it was just obviously prioritising what I thought was best. Obviously this comes down to a big planning strategy, obviously prioritising the work ethic, and I'm one of those people that wants to do everything that bit extra and that 110% at work ethic, which obviously has its drawbacks, because obviously I always went over and beyond, and obviously that then impacted on me sort of taking too much on, which I suppose wasn't a bad thing in one respect, but in another respect it did sometimes cause flare-ups and things. But I think as well, obviously looking back on it, and I did go through a period of time since resigning, sort of August to time, and obviously having that conversation was very difficult. Like anyone resigning from a job, it's difficult, but obviously due to health reasons it was particularly hard, especially because they were so understanding of my disability and went over and beyond themselves to sort of ensure that I was working in an environment that I felt safe, and I felt that I could ask for things if I needed them. But I think certainly looking back on having that conversation and actually making that ultimate decision of, okay, I can't carry on anymore because I will end up in a worse situation. I did actually have a flare up in June time, and I was off work for a number of weeks completely, and then I went back on a part-time basis, which did help. But I think now reflecting on it, it's opened my eyes a bit more in terms of understanding that you've got to be firm and persistent with yourself, and know that you've got to sort of know what your body's telling you to do, but also achieving those goals that you want to achieve as well. So it's obviously, I'm now adjusting to the new normal life. I'm not currently working at the moment. I'm just taking a bit of time to sort of take some time for respite as well. My physical and mental health back to the usual Luciana, should we say. And also obviously just, I've looked back on it now, even though I did go through sort of a dip, where I was very low, and I have received some therapy for it. I think it's also just about looking back in it in a positive way, because had I not, say, had the flare, which I know is a devastating thing and it is distressing and it's uncomfortable, I feel like that was sort of a wake-up call for me to sort of understand that, yes, okay, I do need to stop and I do need to cut back, and perhaps it is part-time that I look at doing in the near future. But also it's more important that you've got to sort of believe in yourself and apply those past experiences that you've gone through, good or bad, to understand that, I mean, for months I kept thinking I'm a failure because I can't work anymore, I've let my family down, my friends down. But now looking back, that isn't the case, because your health is always the priority. And I've learned so many things in these past few months. I've built up on my hobbies. I've sort of understood myself a bit better. I know what my sort of key skills and sort of attributes are, so I can learn from that and I can focus on them more in a future role. Um, but yeah, I just think that yes, it sort of was a negative at the time, but I've now learned to sort of see it in a positive way, and use those sort of experiences in a way that I can use them in the future. So yeah, I think it's just really important to, as a sufferer of FOP and also any other physical mental disabilities that a lot of people have out there, it's all about being open and honest at the start, sort of laying the foundations with your employer or peers, and just ensuring that they are aware of your needs and things, but also so that they can be there to help you, because it's all you sort of building that support team around you, whether it's through work or your peers and friends, colleagues. And also, if they don't know, then they're not going to be able to help you and give you the right advice and support.
Thank you, Luciana. I think you had so many, it was amazing to hear your story about your commitment to work, that you were so dedicated to your task and that you had such an amazing support group there in your office. And I know that was an incredibly hard decision and one that you, as you shared, you kind of wrestled with. But I will tell everyone that Luciana is an amazing baker. And so she has so many more skills that she's working on now. That's just one of them. So thank you for sharing that experience with us.
You're
Does
welcome.
anyone have questions for Luciana before we kind of move on and talk with Oliver? Great. Well, Luciana, I was wondering, can you maybe give like one tip or one piece of advice for someone who's just left or who's going through that transition? Now that you've been through it once, what is maybe one thing you would tell someone who's just left that job or just had to change their life pattern? Like, what would be your one piece of advice to maybe kind of steer them to?
Yeah, I think obviously if you're looking to make the decision of leaving because of health reasons, don't be ashamed about it, because obviously your health is always priority, whether it's FOP related or mental health related. Obviously mine was a combination of the two at the time, but don't be afraid to have that conversation. I was in a bad place trying to like have that conversation with the HR manager at work, but once I'd had it, I felt so much better and it was a huge weight lifted, and obviously all that stress and anxiety was obviously impacting FOP as well. So it's like a flick between the two. But if you've already done the decision and obviously you're sort of in a place where you're thinking, oh my God, what do I do now? Can I get a job? And because obviously I was thinking for a while, what am I going to be able to do? Like worrying continuously because I'm thinking, well, I can't do X amount of hours at a full time. And obviously the COVID world doesn't help either. But obviously, again, just focus on what you know that you can do. Don't focus on what you can't do. And just really sort of prove yourself that you can do things. It's not that you can't do anything. Of course, we have our limits to certain things, and obviously everybody's different. But I think it's just making sure that you sort of talk to yourself and maybe jot down what you feel you've got skills wise and attributes and things, and sort of build on that to a potential new job role. And obviously when you're speaking to new employers, don't focus on the negatives.
Thank you, Luciana. That was a great takeaway. Very motivating. So, all right, well, Ollie is up next. He, like I said, is going to talk about kind of speaking up, advocating for himself in a couple of different areas of life, and not just at one time, but starting a little bit earlier in teenage years as well. Ollie joins us from Australia. So go ahead, Ollie. It's early morning for you there. Thanks for getting up early to be with us.
Thanks for having me, Hope. Hi, everyone. As Hope said, my name is Ollie. I'm a 27-year-old from Brisbane, and I am also a lawyer. This is my 5th year of being a lawyer. So yeah, I'm just gonna have a bit of a chat about my past as trying to advocate for myself, but also generally advocating for disability. I was always encouraged by mum and dad to have quite an active role in my treatment and also for my needs at school and, chatting with friends and everything. So like right from an early age, we were always having those open kind of conversations within our family about FOP and what FOP does and how it impacts on me and impacts on mum and dad and my siblings as well. And I think having that really open dialogue really helped kind of normalize it for me. So there was, I think oftentimes I see with families with children with disabilities, the biggest problem is fear. And so, people don't want to talk about it or acknowledge it. And because of that fear, that kind of blows up all the kind of tumultuous emotions that we feel living with this condition. So I think, having that openness from an early age really helps kind of make it not like it helped me because whenever there was any FOP issues, I was always able to talk about it. And I think talking about it, in my experience, talking about it really helps. And it also helps because then mum and dad and my siblings could talk about what they were feeling as well. Because when you're living with a family member with disability, like everyone's living with it, everyone's watching what it's doing. So that, I think that kind of really set the scene for me to then be able to go into doctor's appointments or go into meetings at my school and be able to speak up for myself and ask for what I needed and ask for what I wanted. And I think that really helped because then, whoever I was talking with, whether they be a teacher or, a specialist doctor, I think they really responded well when they heard it from me rather than maybe hearing it from someone else on my behalf. And yes, I admit it can be quite intimidating, especially as a teenager going up to these doctors who have years of experience working in, a whole bunch of disabilities. Or even, going up to my principal at school, it was quite intimidating and overwhelming when I first started to, I kind of, oh yeah, I'm managing all right, and mum would say, no, speak up, and oh, what about this? And I was like, oh yeah, I need that, and then this and this and this. So mum kind of maybe pushed me a little bit to ask for more and ask for what I actually really needed. But in the end, it was always coming from me. And so that also really, that helped set the scene because I had so much practice of it at school. And at first it was starting with just a meeting with, my teachers and maybe one or two close friends. But within a year or two, when I first started using a mobility scooter, I was then asked if I wanted to present in front of the entire school, which was about 1,500 people. So as a 15-year-old or 14-year-old, that was a pretty big deal. And actually, that's one other thing. So when I was doing that, the school said, do whatever you want. And so then I was chatting with mum and dad and some friends about it, and we thought we'd, have a bit of fun. So we actually, I brought in two friends and they they weren't public speakers, but they said they helped me in that speech. So that was great for them as well. But then we also, with one of the teachers, we filmed a little video. And, I was driving along and they were in a really exaggerated way, jumping out of the way. And, we kind of made it like a bit of a comical video for everyone to watch, just about being safe around the scooter. And, that kind of just, it didn't make light of the disability, but it kind of, I think, made people feel more comfortable, just being around the scooter and seeing me move around with the FOP limb. And it also helps them feel more comfortable, being able to come up to me and ask me, because, I always say, ask me anything. It's always better to ask what you're really thinking, rather than, spend ages wondering and then probably come up with the wrong answer. So, and I think, that's always been my policy. And that's kind of served me well, school, university, then through to work. And even now still, despite me saying this, I do know that there are some people who have taken a long time to ask me something, and they got there eventually. And their preconceived, what they thought the answer was way off. So that just, it reinforces for me that it's a good policy to have, to, always, it can be hard, because even adults, you'll get some very, very bizarre, out of left field questions. But I think opening up this dialogue and having these weird and difficult conversations, we're always helping. We're always working to dispel the myths and to normalize disability, and to make people realize that, we're just people. We have the same needs and wants. I mean, we have more needs, but we have the same wants. We have the same goals in life. We're all part of, diverse humanity. And that's another thing, because disability isn't just people like us who are born with it. Disability can really happen to anyone. So I think it's really important for us to kind of pave the way and help kind of get rid of this fear and this unknown. And then, if one of our friends or family or loved ones, or some, really anyone we come into contact with, if they then experience disability in their own lives, but they see us, happy and working and living independently and all this stuff, that kind of hopefully makes them think and feel, oh, it's going to be okay. I'm going to be able to deal with this. So, I think, as unfair as it is, we're kind of the guinea pigs in life, and we have a really important role to show as many people as we can that, to do, whatever cards you've been dealt, that shouldn't stop you from making the most out of every day and reaching for the stars. And, I think that's one thing I hope to show with, I've started my blog and I'm posting on Instagram, to kind of hopefully encourage other people with disabilities. I think a lot of times people with disabilities are told no, or that's too difficult, don't bother, or why would you want that? It could be something as normal and innocent as I want to live in my own place or something. And, there is a way to do that, and there's a way to get the job you want. There are ways to do things, and I found, talking to a lot of people with FOP, we're quite good at figuring out how to solve problems. So, sometimes we just need a slightly different tack, or we just need, one little special piece of equipment or something. And, that can open up a whole lot of doors for us. So, I think it's really important to keep our chins up and to, set those goals for ourselves, kind of push ourselves to, get to, if there's some dream we have, we have to push ourselves to be able to make it happen. Because, as I said, if we're showing people with disabilities, we're showing our loved ones, and we're showing anyone who might connect with our story, we can do it. I think that's the
And Ollie, you mentioned that you have a blog and an Instagram, and you also did your first podcast interview, right? Someone had requested to interview you for their podcast.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of social media. So I was sharing on Instagram, and then this company called Rare, and it's started by two women in America who, one of them has a rare disease, one of them has a child with a rare disease. And, they connected with what I was writing on Instagram, and then they sent me a message and said, hey, we'd love you to be part of our podcast. And then I've also, some of my posts have been shared on a couple of other rare disease social media pages. I got asked to submit a short story that's going to be published in a book of chronic illness warriors. So, you never really know where these things are going to lead. And, the more you share, the more people might connect with what you're feeling and what you're writing and what you're showing. And then, that just spreads further and further. And, I think social media, while yes, it can be bad sometimes, I think in the case of the disability community and our little FOP community as well, I think it's a really great tool to help, because oftentimes with disability, I think people can feel quite isolated. And I know with FOP doing what it does, and sometimes we're just too tired to go out and see people, so we can be physically isolated as well as emotionally isolated. I think it's really important for us to share. And yeah, sorry,
Ollie. I was just excited to ask my next question for you, which was, you had mentioned that you kind of started with small groups of people before obviously speaking in front of the huge audience at your school. What are other ways that people can get more comfortable sharing their experience? Do you have tips or advice for how to maybe practice before, so that you can be confident in those larger settings? Or if you're speaking with, example, you said a doctor is a very intimidating, or can be a very intimidating person to kind of pipe up and voice your experience to. So what did you do to prepare yourself or to feel confident in those settings?
As I said, Mum and Dad have always had conversations, so we'd just be over the dinner table and chatting about it. But I was a pretty traditional speech preparer, so I wrote out my little note cards, and then I just said, Mum and Dad, or my brother or sister, hey, can you come into my room? And they just lie down on the bed, and I would stand up and look at them as if they were an audience, and I'd just, I'd read it, 10, 20 times, just kind of make it, going over it, getting comfortable. And then, before I did it at school, I'd say to a couple of friends, hey, can you just come over here at lunchtime? And, I'd practice it in front of them because they're not family. So it was a bit more, as if it was the real thing. And also I found, no matter the group, there was someone I knew in the audience. And so I would tend to, if I was getting a bit hyped up, I would kind of just turn around and look at wherever they find them in the audience before I started. So then when I was doing the speech, if I was getting worked up, I could just kind of turn to them and, like as if I was speaking to them. And then, kind of calm down, then you can start looking around again. So you've just, it's just got to find what works for you. But yeah, that always helped me. And then also, as you kind of practice and as the audience gets bigger, you kind of like, I mean, we live with this FOP, so really it shouldn't be hard to talk about it, but it is. But it gets easier as you kind of keep going over the speech. And, sometimes you'll have to adapt because, for example, when I was telling people at work, it's a bit of a different conversation to when I was talking at school when I was 14. And also you'll have to adapt as the FOP progresses. But hopefully, with if you start practicing, now or early on in life, then you'll get more comfortable, and then it won't be such a big deal.
Thank you, Ollie. Did anyone else? I didn't even give other people a chance to ask questions. I just dove in. Did anyone else have a question for Ollie? Okay, well, we'll have another chance, but last but certainly not least, we're going to hear from Miriam. So Miriam is joining us from stateside here in the US. She lives in sunny California, which I'm always jealous of. Every time I talk to her, I'm just like, oh, you have gorgeous weather there, I know. So she is going to tell a little bit about her experience advocating in some medical settings, but also just building her support group, which we know is such an important part of being able to advocate for yourself. So take it away, Miriam.
Hi. So I'm Miriam, and like you said, I live in California, where I think it's supposed to be in the 70s today, just to make you all jealous. And I am 42 and was diagnosed with FOP when I was like 13-ish after a saga, but that's not relevant. Anyway, I don't have a job at the moment for various reasons, including physical health, mental health, and the fact that the benefits I get for paying for in-home care are dependent on not having an income, which is stupid. That's a discussion for another time. I also have a lot of thoughts about doing things which are meaningful, even if you don't have a job, but that's also not the point here. So I have had a lot of experience with trying to deal with medical people. Granted, I think everyone in the FOP community has had some experience with that, and with the educating every new doctor about what FOP is and what its effects are. Interestingly, some of the worst issues I've had aren't directly because FOP is rare, it's because of other stuff. So one principle I have picked up along the way and like to tell other people who are dealing with chronic medical issues is that you know your body best. The doctors have a lot of medical training, but you have however many years you have of living in your body. And so you can tell if something is new or different or wrong or whatever. There was a time when I had, well, with mental health aspects, I've been diagnosed with chronic depression since college, basically. So maybe like 10, 15 years ago, I started getting new fatigue symptoms. And I went into my doctor and I was like, hey, this is a new symptom. Can we check it out? And he looked at me and he was like, well, you have depression and fatigue is a symptom of depression, so it's probably just that. And I knew what depression fatigue felt like, and this was not it. And there was no reason why depression would have kicked in at that point. And so I was like, can we at least run some blood tests? Because I had picked up along the way that, like, say, low vitamin D can make you more tired. And he said, and this was like an older doctor, he said that the average American diet can provide all the vitamins and nutrients that anybody needs, so there's no reason to test. And I didn't think that that was true. I ended up going to a different doctor, and I said to her, hey, I have this new fatigue, can we test my blood? And she said, sure, I'll do that and we can figure out what's going on. To be clear, I wasn't trying to diagnose myself. There's also like the possibility of thyroid stuff, which blood tests can pick up. There were various other possibilities. I just wanted to rule stuff out. We did blood tests and my vitamin D was really low, which I did not get the chance to go back to the first doctor and go, haha, I told you so. It was tempting. So knowing like what is different about your body, knowing that like this pain doesn't feel like FOP pain, so it might be something else. A lot of times doctors will sweep everything under a single umbrella. There's another phrase that I've picked up from some of my friends with other chronic illnesses, which is, I don't know if this is actually a saying in medicine, but if you hear hoofbeats, it's probably horses, not zebras. But sometimes it's a zebra. There's actually a medical condition that the people who have it use a zebra as a mascot because of this saying. Because doctors will say, oh, it's a horse. And sometimes you're like, no, there are actually stripes on this symptom, like it's black and white. You can see it's a zebra. But being able to like say, like, no, this explanation doesn't really work, or can we explore this, or can we rule this out, can be helpful. And another thing I've found is that the thing that should be the obvious solution for a problem is not always where you get a solution. There was a time where I had been prescribed Vicodin for pain as needed, but I was taking it pretty much constantly. And I was like getting pain that it wasn't helping with. So I went into the pain management center, like I got a referral, and it was a clinic specifically for pain management. And I was like, great, they can help me figure out how to manage my pain. And they said that they had looked at my x-rays and it did in fact look like it would be quite painful having all that bone, and that I was very brave, but that they didn't want to put me on opioids, so I should just keep doing what I was doing. And I went back and I rented a lot to my friends online, and I ended up getting a better option through my psychiatrist, who believes that pain control is part of mental health because chronic pain can be a stressor on the brain. So now I have somewhat better pain control options, still not perfect. It's weird that, bone where it shouldn't be is painful, who would have guessed? And in both cases, I was not like directly arguing with the people that didn't help me. I am by nature very shy and very conflict averse. I do not like arguing with people. I do not like face-to-face confrontations. But you don't have to be able to do face-to-face confrontations to be able to send a message saying, hey, I'm not satisfied with this result. Can we try this other thing? Or to try other avenues. And it's also something that you get better with over time. Like 20 years ago, I would be more likely to say, oh, okay, and go home and grumble that it sucks and then not follow up. As I have gotten older, but not old, I've learned that like sticking up for myself is important because like my doctor has however many patients, she's not going to prioritize me. So I have to prioritize me. And that kind of circles back to having like a support network or a like team U, which sometimes it can be just for like having people that you can grumble about your experience at the doctor and they can like give you, in some cases, virtual hugs and like sympathy. And sometimes it's having people that can give suggestions, or sometimes it's like seeing a symptom of something and be like, oh, maybe that could explain it. Like the thing with the vitamin D, where I had seen it before I went to the doctor as one of the possible explanations. The weird thing about friendship is when you're 5, you can like go up to someone and say, want to be my friend? And they will say yes or no, and then you'll play and it's all good. Adults don't do that. And there's a thing I consider a like friendship paradox, where if you go out trying to find friends, it's really, really hard. If you go out doing other things, you will find friends along the way. So my 2 biggest sources, or like, well, 3 biggest communities of support, all of these are online. One of them was a group of people that I met doing tech support for a online website. Well, obviously it's an online website, all websites. No. So there was a group of people that would all provide volunteer tech support, and a lot of them happened to have chronic medical conditions. And so we kind of banded together under the like chronic medical conditions suck umbrella. And the whole like doctors don't know what to do with chronic medical conditions because they like things that they can make better and they can't make us better. So they don't know what to do with us. And it's from them that I've gotten some of the like how to, or like what possible explanations there are for fatigue, or how to get around not being confrontational or whatever. Second main group was people that I met as part of a knitting website. Knitting and crochet is one of my hobbies, and there's a big like social media website for knit and crochet people. And I found people with like similar senses of humor, similar interests other than just the knitting and crochet, similar like whatever. And became like really good friends with them. And not all of them have chronic medical conditions, but they're all really awesome people. And I would not have met them without doing the knitting stuff. And I wouldn't have met them if I'd tried to be like, who on here is worth being a friend to? It's just like random happenstance. And then there's like actual like deliberate communities like the FOP community, or just like the really vague, disorganized chronic medical condition community on, say, Twitter, where you can like shout out into the void of Twitter that like your doctor is being frustrating, and you can get people that you don't know saying like, yeah, I had a similar thing last year. It really sucks. And it's just like this, it doesn't have well-defined edges. It's not like a group of people. It's just the like blob of people with similar frustrations. But it can be really useful, both having people who know what it's like to have FOP, or to have chronic pain, or to have asshole doctors or whatever. And similarly, it can be helpful to have people who are like well, not normal. None of my friends are normal, but like able-bodied who can just provide friendship and backup. And
what I loved, Miriam, was that I feel like you kind of showcased how when you're effectively using your support network, they're kind of doing some of the work for you as well. So they're doing like the
yes,
research in the example of the vitamin D and the fatigue. You know, that was something that someone within your support group kind of brought up or shared that point, and you were able to use that content or that knowledge to better advocate for yourself with your doctor. So I think that's a great example of really harnessing the power of a good support network.
and that one wasn't even like someone personally saying, hey, you might have low vitamin D. It was just a general like, hey, people on my friends list, low vitamin D is a thing, and this is some of the symptoms. And I went down the symptoms and I was like, yes, 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 maybe, yes, yes. This seems like a possibility. And so it wasn't even like directed at me, just like, this is, I think it was someone that had low vitamin D and was like, this is what it was like for me. And I looked at that and looked at my own experience, and I was like, you know, it's worth checking.
And did anyone else have a question for Miriam? Okay.